And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas, gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today's May the 15th, 135th day of this year. Just 230 days remain to the year's over with. And it's a day that's recognized globally and across the U.S. with a mix of international awareness and fun and food-focused observances. It's International Day of Families, global observance primarily proclaimed by the United Nations to highlight the importance of families worldwide. Peace Officers Memorial Day, significant U.S. federal observance honoring fallen law enforcement officers. National Endangered Species Day, third Friday in May, is widely marked in the U.S. to raise awareness about protecting rare wildlife and ecosystems. And finally, Fun Food Day, Treat Heavy Day, featuring National Chocolate Chip Day and National Pizza Party Day. Well, been a notable historical things happen on May 15th. In 1932, we had the May 15th incident, an attempted coup d'etat where Prime Minister Nukai Tsuyoshi was assassinated. And for those who love fast food, on this date, 1940, Richard Maurice McDonald opened the very first McDonald's restaurant in San Bernardino, California. And let's see what stories we have in the news, because there's always something going on. Well, okay. President Trump has departed China after pushing trade deals. President Trump and President Xi made the remarks at a state banquet on day 2 of the Chinese visit. The two presidents both made toast, heralding the importance of the U.S.-China relationship at a state banquet held in Beijing. During President Trump's speech, he invited Xi to visit the White House on September 24th. Then the two sat down for 2.5 hours before the banquet, discussing oil and the war in Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, increasing U.S. access to Chinese markets, and halting the flow of fentanyl precursors to the U.S. Two sides agreed that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, and that Strait of Hormuz must remain open, according to the White House. Chinese spokesperson said that Xi warned Trump if the Taiwan issue is not handled properly, the two countries will have clashes and even conflicts, putting the entire relationship in jeopardy. And the two are expected to sit again for a bilateral team meeting at 11:40 a.m. this morning, local time. And let's see if we can get something constructive out of this meeting. President Trump revealed Xi's stance on arming Iran as Hormuz tensions rattle the markets. He said Chinese President has said he will not provide military equipment to Iran, which has been a central focus of the high-stakes meeting, marking a possible win for the Trump administration. She said he's not going to give military equipment. That's a big statement. He said that today, and that's a big statement. He said it strongly, Trump said to Fox News host Sean Hannity. The pledge comes as the Trump administration increasingly has cast China not just as an economic rival, but as a key enabler of adversarial regimes, with Beijing's economic and material support for Iran emerging as a central focus for this week's high-stakes talk. U.S. officials have increasingly accused China of helping prop up Iran's military and economic strength through oil purchases, dual-use exports, and intermediary networks. In fact, president of China offered to help end the conflict. He said, if I can be of any help at all, I'd like to be of help. Just let me know. Criminal profiler reveals extremely rare red flag in the case of suspected serial killer, migrant in Texas. Prominent criminal profiler is warning that a suspected serial killer in Texas has allegedly started years earlier than expected and fears there may be more victims due to a 6-year gap between murder charges. Luis Benitez Gonzalez, a 25-year-old previously deported Mexican national, is accused of strangling 2 women in the Austin, Texas area in 2018 and 2024. Police announced his arrest earlier this week after 2 more women survived shootings in 2025, including one who fought back and police say swiped her attacker's cell phone. As the profiler said, we usually never find out who the first victim really was. I just wonder how many this guy has killed with his homicidal anger toward women over the years. Well, we'll see if more comes to light. Well, a man shot at an In-N-Out drive-thru drove the family to safety with a bullet stuck in his head. Oregon police have arrested 2 suspects in connection with the shooting of a father who drove himself to a hospital after being struck in the head by a bullet after shots rang out while he was pulling out of the In-N-Out drive-thru with his wife and 2 sons. Ethan Adrian Armenta Lagunas, 20, and Gabriel Alex Javier, 18, both of Salem, were taken into custody Wednesday. They face charges of first-degree assault, unlawful use of a weapon, criminal mischief, and recklessly endangering another person in connection with the February night shooting of Marcio Garcia. Multiple guns were allegedly found at Armenta Lagunas' apartment, the Kaiser Police Department said. Javier was arrested later in the day. Authorities are still searching for a third suspect, 22-year-old Anthony Taylor Enriquez, who's considered armed and dangerous. Garcia, 28, was in the car with his wife and 2 children, ages 2 and 7, when shots rang out near the burger chain. Gunfire shattered the car windows and hit Garcia in the head. His wife and children are uninjured, and apparently he got to the hospital without further excitement. Well, Demi Moore sparks fascist propaganda backlash at Cannes after telling Hollywood to stop fighting AI. She's under fire after declaring Hollywood's war against artificial intelligence has already lost. The actress sparked immediate backlash online after urging the entertainment industry to stop fighting AI and instead learn to work alongside it. The againstness just breeds againstness, she said. New word. AI's here, and so to fight it is, in a sense, to fight something that's a battle we're going to lose. So to find ways in which we can work with it, I think, is a more valuable path, she said during an appearance at the Cannes Film Festival. It's going to deadline. Are we doing enough to protect ourselves? I don't know. My inclination would be to say probably not. Remarks ignited outrage across social media, where critics accused the Hollywood veteran of effectively surrendering the future of filmmaking in Silicon Valley and corporate tech interest. Interesting thing is, through the use of AI, you can do all kinds of interesting things. And we've been upgrading our equipment, and our new system just arrived yesterday. So we're hopefully going to be moving into new realms we haven't explored before on this show. Well, Dana White's in the news. There was a confrontation with a Warriors owner who tried to unzip his Celtics hoodie. He's still in disbelief over how he was treated by the Golden State Warriors majority owner at a game when he showed up wearing his Celtics gear. The UFC CEO said on the Katie Miller podcast when asked to name the rudest celebrity he's encountered. But that's a great question. Let me think about this so I can really effing stick it to who it was. After initially naming P. Diddy, he immediately remembered an incident that burned into his brain. The owner of the Warriors, White shot back. He then proceeded to recall an incident in San Francisco when the Celtics were in town for a game. And Dana, who has deep Boston roots, wore his Celtics gear like any other fan would. Said he had his Celtics hoodie on, and they were sitting there, and can't remember his name, the owner of the Warriors. He's majority owner, he and his wife. And while prevailing thought is that White's referencing billionaire venture capitalist Joe Lacob, and his wife, Nicole Curran. They came in, and they're sitting a couple seats over from him, and walks up to him, and he's like, "Oh, I heard you were here, and are you serious with that hoodie?" He said, "I get it. Whatever." I think he's joking, so he literally starts trying to unzip the hoodie and take it off of him. And the wife is talking smack, he said. So, according to Dana, the owner's wife holds up her hand that's filled with championship rings as she taunted the UFC legend. Well, it takes all kinds to make a world, and some folks, their egos are frankly just too big. Well, the blue state bill is targeting homeschoolers in the latest government power grab. After decades of parental rights victories, Connecticut, they become the first state to go backward on homeschool freedom in the past 50 years. Connecticut Senate advanced a bill attacking homeschooling families by a vote of 22-14, mostly along party lines. Clearly, the Democrats are just totally out of control. 3 Democrats joined all the Republicans in opposition. The measure cleared the House 95-53 last week, with 4 Democrats crossing the aisle to stand with the Republicans. Those margins fall short of the 2/3 supermajority required in both chambers to override a gubernatorial veto. Connecticut families now only have one remaining safeguard. Leadership should respect the fundamental rights of parents to direct the upbringing and education of their children and block this Orwellian legislation. The proposal would force homeschooling families to prove their innocence to the government before they can educate their own kids at home. It requires annual notices of intent and background checks by the Department of Children and Families when a child is withdrawn from public school. Families will be barred from homeschooling altogether if a parent or any other adult in the household faces an active DCF investigation or appears on the state's abuse and neglect registry. So at least in Connecticut, the days of the parents deciding the future of their child seems to be on the way down. Well, Kalisa Ballerini stuns in a striped bikini before hinting at the new music collaboration. She's kicking a hot girl summer off a little early. In a recent Instagram post, the 32-year-old country singer posted a photo dump featuring some of the fun she's been having recently, according to a beach picture. She says she's getting her steps in, making music and finding ramen, learning sports, and simply vibing, she wrote in the caption. One photo showed her lying on her stomach on a beach towel while sitting on the seashore with the ocean behind her. In that photo, she can be seen sporting a black and white striped bikini top, gold hoop earrings, and black sunglasses. Her hair's in braids. Well, each to their own, I guess. Let's see. Our next story. Students at Top Party College are on edge after a rape and strangulation have been reported in campus housing. Students at the University of California, Santa Barbara, ranked as the top party school in the country, are on edge after a rape and strangulation was reported on campus over the weekend. At 10 p.m. Saturday, police sent out a university-wide alert to notify students, faculty, and staff about the incident. The University of California, Santa Barbara Police Department daily log indicates that the rape and strangulation report happened on in-campus housing. Student-run newspaper, the Daily Nexus, reported a suspect and victim were just met at a party in the Isle Vista neighborhood near the school. Didn't know each other prior to the reported incident. Of course, strangling somebody is a way to get up close and personal. Police haven't yet released any suspect information or further details about the incident. And as I said, UC Santa Barbara has been ranked as the top party school in the U.S. for the last 2 years, according to Niche Best Colleges. Over the last few years, the school has also seen an increase in crimes like sexual assault and weapons arrests and burglaries, according to other folks on campus. Recent data shows the school saw more than 100 reported rape cases from 2022 to 2024. Well, I'm glad my college years are long behind me. Well, there was a new study showing how much you need to retire. Yeah, I got a state-by-state breakdown for you somewhere among all these papers. The lowest cost state analyzed was West Virginia. It's at an annual necessities cost of living of $29,059 with a comfortable cost of living at $58,117 per year, or $33,223 after accounting for Social Security income. The monthly savings target for West Virginia would start at $1,280 for those ages 20 or $1,582 at age 30 with Social Security income. Those would rise to $2,152 and $2,767 respectively. Some states just make it impossible to live with cost of living. Other states you can be quite comfortable. Well, former CIA agent John Kiriakou reveals how sex plays a major role in espionage and spying, which you could have learned watching James Bond. Well, intelligence agencies around the globe aren't afraid to use sex to get vital information. Shadowing world of espionage is one of the most fascinating topics when it comes to black ops and geopolitics and things that happen the world is not supposed to know about. It can be a very dark, nasty world to operate in. Trust runs low. You never know who could be working what angle. And one of the biggest plays some intelligence sources use, of course, is sex. Former CIA agent reveals how sex is used in espionage in a recent interview. Former CIA officer John Kiriakou has become one of the most famous former intelligence agents in the country. He's blown up in the media over the past year, and he's never afraid to discuss taboo intelligence topics. That includes how spies around the world throughout history have used sex to get what they want. Well, some of these revelations are, quite frankly, extremely interesting. Well, a Mother's Day chaos broke out at a steakhouse. It includes knives thrown at waiters and a touching mother-daughter arrest. An upscale restaurant in West Little Rock, Arkansas, descended into chaos on Mother's Day when the staff failed to show the proper level of respect to the TikTok food influencers who entered their establishment. Words were exchanged between influencers and the staff, and other customers got involved in the verbal exchange. And then it got heated and turned physical. According to the Little Rock Police Department, knives are actually thrown. Asia, Alicia, and Olivia Yarborough, who, according to the Daily Mail, all have large numbers of followers, had an issue with how their steaks had been cooked at the Arthur's Prime Steakhouse on Sunday. They asked the restaurant staff to have all three of the steaks remade to their specifications, according to KATV. The manager initially refused to remake one of them, then later brought it out and shoved it in their faces, saying this is how it's done. Well, there's a chance you can get away with that when dealing with regular customers, but it's not going to fly with disrespect to food influencers who use their notoriety to actually hurt your business. They have millions of followers, and they don't stand for that. At minimum, a scene will be caused, a scene where you're going to find out from a proud mama that her kids have tens of millions of social media followers. Well, a Marxist tech mogul has targeted 736 anti-Israel protests across 39 countries. They spent $278 million funding these protests. It's being done by a well-funded leftist Islamist group. A global network of anti-Israel activist groups is mobilizing a coordinated, not by 78 protests across the U.S. and around the world, with organizers using the anniversary of Israel's founding to challenge the Jewish state's right to exist. Their day of founding, I think, was the 14th, which was yesterday. Fox News Digital Investigation found that about 425 organizations, including communist groups and Muslim advocacy organizations and Israel activist coalitions attributed to blatant anti-Semitism, working together in a coordinated transnational protest network with a combined funding footprint of about $1 billion in annual revenues. They should find something more constructive to do with that money. I would question whether they have the right to exist, but that's just me trying to be fair. But most Americans have no idea the Chinese Communist Party controls the most intimate elements of our life. Critical minerals quietly powering every aspect of modern American life. If you pour your morning coffee, you're relying on copper wiring and silicon chips working behind the scenes inside your coffee maker. When you grab milk from the refrigerator, you're depending on metal components, copper wiring, and electronic controls to keep everything cold. Turn on the TV to another round of bickering politicians on cable news and looking at a screen built with indium and lithium and other rare earth phosphorus. Flip off the lights, hop in your car, and connect your phone to Bluetooth and turn on your favorite podcast for the drive to work. That everyday routine depends on copper, lithium, and a whole host of other critical minerals that power batteries and speakers, navigation systems, electric motors, and modern communications technology. So China does have quite an impact on our daily life. Death row inmate who ate 3 last meals has been granted bond after the Supreme Court overturned his conviction. Former death row inmate Richard Glossip, set to be released on bond as he awaits retrial on a 1997 killing for which he was very nearly executed 3 times and had 3 last meal requests. Examining the ample record in his case, Judge Natalie Mai found Thursday that she couldn't deny bail for the longtime prisoner who was convicted of first-degree murder in 1998. She issued an order setting bond at $500,000 and mandated he remain in Oklahoma wearing an electronic monitoring device. I would question if this judge understands what her actions have potentially doing, letting a convicted murderer out after he was sentenced to death. Well, we've been talking about a lot of interesting topics. You know, there's been a big release of a lot of UFO-related data. You know, for generations, the subject of unidentified flying objects existed in the shadows between rumor and ridicule and classified intelligence operations and genuine mystery. Pilots whispered about impossible craft. Radar operators tracked targets capable of maneuvers beyond known aviation technology. Astronauts hinted at unexplained observations. Military personnel signed non-disclosure agreements and remained silent for decades. And ordinary citizens who reported strange encounters often found themselves mocked and dismissed or ignored. But despite decades of denials, something extraordinary slowly began to change. Governments around the world, particularly the U.S. government, started admitting that unidentified aerial phenomena was real. Not necessarily extraterrestrial, not necessarily hostile, but undeniably real. Navy gun camera footage was authenticated and released. Congressional hearings were coordinated. Intelligence officials testified under oath. Task forces were formed, and Pentagon programs, once dismissed as fantasy, were openly acknowledged to be real. And then came the releases of information. Thousands of pages of federal files began emerging from archives and defense agencies and intelligence reviews and contractor memoranda, pilot reports, astronaut transcripts, and long-buried investigative summaries. Some documents were heavily redacted. Others appeared incomplete. A few raised more questions than they answered. But collectively, they painted a disturbing picture. The phenomenon never truly went away. And we've just came out with a new book called the UFO Disclosure Files, what the government finally released and what they didn't. And if you want to read more about it, go to Amazon Kindle, look up Ken Hudnall. We just came out with our 140th book the other day. Now, the purpose of our books is not to claim absolute answers where none yet exist. And it's not blind belief, nor is it automatic skepticism. Instead, we try to examine the disclosure movement through the lens of history and intelligence operations and military testimony and declassified files. And the growing realization that the public may have been given only fragments of a far larger story so far. So what exactly are these objects that people keep seeing in the sky? Are they advanced foreign technology? Are they black budget aerospace projects? Are they artificial intelligence surveillance systems? Maybe psychological operations, interdimensional phenomena? Or could it be something not originating from Earth at all? Well, these are questions that certainly deserve to be addressed, but they've never been answered. One thing's become increasingly difficult to deny, though. Governments have known far more about the phenomenon than they've admitted publicly for decades. And as these files emerged, researchers across the world began comparing newly released records against historical incidents, stretching back more than 70 years. Familiar names resurfaced: Roswell, Rendlesham Forest, the Belgian Wave, the Phoenix Lights, Tic Tac encounters, missile shutdown incidents, Apollo mission anomalies, and mysterious radar tracks over restricted military airspace. Deeper investigators looked, the more apparent a troubling pattern became. Information had often been released slowly, selectively, and under pressure. Certain incidents were acknowledged, and others remained buried behind classification walls. Public disclosure seemed carefully managed, controlled not by scientific transparency, but by national security interest. That raises questions. The most important of all was if these files represent disclosure, what's still being withheld? And certainly, only a fraction has been released. Well, throughout my many years researching intelligence operations and military history and unexplained phenomena and covert government programs, I've learned a simple truth. Institutions rarely reveal sensitive information voluntarily unless circumstances force their hand. The release of these files may not represent the end of secrecy. It only represents the beginning of a new phase in information management. Well, we're going to explore the history leading to the modern disclosure era, the newly released records themselves and people behind the investigations, and the unanswered mystery still hidden beneath the layers of bureaucracy and classification. Now, some folks are going to approach our discussions as firm believers, others as firm skeptics, And I do welcome both perspectives. The evidence deserves examination regardless of personal opinion, because whether the ultimate explanation proves terrestrial, extraterrestrial, psychological, technological, or something entirely unforeseen, the implications are still profound. Humanity may be confronting one of the greatest mysteries in recorded history. And for the first time, the doors protecting this mystery appear to be slowly opening. Now, the modern UFO era officially began in the summer of 1947. Though strange objects in the sky had been reported for centuries before that. Ancient civilizations recorded fiery wheels and luminous discs and unexplained aerial phenomena in religious texts and folklore. Yet the events of 1947 transformed isolated mysteries into a worldwide phenomena tied directly to modern military and intelligence concerns. Now, this so-called UFO era actually started in Mount Rainier, Washington. Private pilot Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 crescent-shaped objects moving at extraordinary speeds across the sky. He later described their motion as resembling a saucer skipping across the water. Well, newspapers, of course, quickly misinterpreted that description and said the phrase flying saucer was born out of that almost overnight. Within days, reports exploded across the U.S. Pilots and police officers, military personnel, and ordinary civilians began describing strange discs, glowing craft, and unidentified objects maneuvering in ways that defied conventional aviation. Now, some sightings, of course, were a likely hoax. There's always going to be the folks who think it's fun to make things up. Others were misidentified aircraft or atmospheric phenomena. But not every one of them was a weather balloon. Buried among the noise were incidents that deeply concerned the U.S. military. And then came Roswell. July 1947, personnel from Roswell Army Airfield announced that they had recovered a flying disc from a ranch in New Mexico. That story made headlines around the country before military authorities actually reversed course, claiming the debris actually came from, wait for it, a weather balloon. For decades, Roswell faded into obscurity. Yet behind the scenes, the U.S. government had already begun quietly monitoring the growing phenomena. Intelligence officials feared multiple possibilities simultaneously. They thought it could be Soviet psychological warfare, advanced foreign aircraft, or mass public panic. And the chance, remote chance, but a chance, that something genuinely unknown was operating in American airspace. You know, in 1947, we were the most powerful country in the world. We couldn't control what was flying in our skies. By the early 1950s, the Air Force established a series of official UFO investigations, including Project Sign, Project Grudge, and eventually Project Blue Book. Now, publicly, these projects were presented as scientific investigations intended to reassure the public. Privately, they had a much different mission. Internal memoranda revealed concerns UFO reports could overwhelm communication systems during wartime or be exploited by foreign adversaries. Intelligence agencies worried the phenomena could trigger social instability if mishandled. The famous Robertson panel of 1953 became a turning point. Convened by the CIA, the panel concluded that UFOs themselves posed less danger than public fascination with them. Officials feared adversaries could exploit mass sightings to clog military reporting channels and create confusion during a national emergency. So the solution, of course, was not full transparency. Instead, the government adopted a strategy of public debunking and controlled ridicule. In fact, one of the findings in that panel was even if we had solid proof of extraterrestrial involvement, it was for the public's own good that the government lie about it. Scientists, media organizations, and military spokesmen increasingly dismissed sightings regardless of witness credibility. Pilots who reported encounters risked damage to their careers. Radar operators learned quickly that discussing unusual tracks could bring unwanted scrutiny. Military personnel signed secrecy agreements and remained silent for decades. I know back in my military days, during an operation, we had a sighting. When I reported it, I was told if I wanted to remain an officer, I didn't see anything. I got the message. Despite the official dismissals, sightings continued. Some became impossible to ignore. In Washington, D.C., during the summer of 1952, radar operators tracked unknown objects maneuvering over the nation's capital itself. Fighter jets were scrambled repeatedly. Pilots visually observed luminous objects performing extraordinary maneuvers before they vanished. Public demand that there be answers. The Air Force insisted there was no threat. The classified discussions told an entirely different story. Throughout the Cold War, intelligence agencies quietly collected UFO reports from around the world. Encounters involving nuclear weapons facilities drew particular attention. Missile crews reported glowing objects hovering near launch sites, and some personnel claimed a missile temporarily malfunctions during those sightings. Well, the pattern repeated itself internationally. The British, the Soviets, the French, the Belgian, Brazilian, and Canadian authorities all conducted varying degrees of classified UFO research. Officially, most governments dismissed the phenomenon publicly while quietly investigating it behind closed doors. Then came the astronauts. America's space program introduced an entirely new dimension to the mystery. Rumors circulated about unexplained objects seen during Gemini and Apollo missions. Some astronauts denied witnessing anything unusual. Others hinted carefully at incidents they refused to fully discuss publicly. And over time, a disturbing contradiction emerged. Publicly, the phenomena was nonsense. Privately, the government spent millions of dollars of taxpayer funds to keep studying them. And that contradiction would persist for decades, and eventually the walls of secrecy would begin to crack. Well, for years, the U.S. government insisted it no longer seriously investigated UFOs after the closure of Project Blue Book in 1969. And I'm one of many who believe that Blue Book was actually a publicity project, not a true investigative agency. Officials repeatedly claimed there was no evidence unidentified aerial phenomena represented advanced technology, extraterrestrial craft, or even a national security threat. Well, these assurances proved misleading, though. Hidden behind layers of classified funding and bureaucratic compartmentalization, multiple government-connected investigations quietly continued. One of the most controversial involved a program few Americans had ever heard of until recent years. The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, better known as the AATIP. The existence of this program became public after explosive revelations from former intelligence officials and investigative journalists. The program reportedly operated within the Department of Defense and examined military encounters involving unexplained aerial phenomena. According to officials associated with the project, investigators analyzed radar data, infrared footage, pilot testimony, aerospace capabilities, and encounters involving objects demonstrating extraordinary performance. The program's existence stunned the public. For decades, Americans have been assured the government no longer took UFOs seriously. Yet here was evidence that Pentagon had quietly considered and continued monitoring the phenomena. Most famous incident that tied to the AATIP involved the USS Nimitz carrier strike group in 2004. Navy pilots operating off the California coast encountered a bizarre white object, later nicknamed the Tic Tac. Radar operators tracked the object descending from high altitude to sea level in seconds. Pilots described a smooth, wingless craft capable of abrupt maneuvers impossible for known aircraft. And Commander David Fravor later described the encounter publicly. According to Fravor, the object appeared aware of his aircraft and reacted intelligently to his movements before accelerating away at astonishing speed. Infrared video footage associated with later Navy encounters intensified public interest. Clips labeled Gimbal and Go Fast and FLIR 1 spread rapidly online. Initially dismissed by skeptics, the videos are eventually authenticated by the Pentagon itself. Suddenly, the conversation changed. The issue was no longer limited to civilians claiming mysterious lights in the sky. These were trained military aviators operating advanced sensor systems while describing encounters with objects displaying capabilities far beyond known aviation technology. Congress began asking questions. Intelligence officials provided classified briefings. Senators demanded transparency regarding unidentified objects operating near military training zones and sensitive installations. But even amid growing openness, contradictions persisted. Officials admitted the objects were real while refusing to explain what they were. Some analysts believed the craft represented advanced foreign technology developed by adversaries such as China or Russia. Others argued that observed capabilities exceeded known aerospace engineering entirely. Then came the whistleblowers. Former intelligence officer David Grush ignited worldwide controversy when he claimed the U.S. possessed crashed retrieval programs involving non-human craft. He alleged information had been illegally withheld from Congress for decades. Supporters viewed him as courageous. Critics viewed him as unreliable. Whatever your interpretation might be, the disclosure movement accelerated dramatically. The Pentagon established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or the AARO. They loved their initials. Its job was to investigate unidentified phenomena across air, sea, and space. Hearings took place on Capitol Hill. Military personnel increasingly came forward, describing encounters they had once feared discussing publicly. The stigma surrounding UFO reports began slowly eroding, but many researchers remained skeptical of the government's sudden openness. Why now? Why release videos and admit the existence of investigations after decades of denial? Well, some believe public transparency had finally prevailed. Others suspected controlled disclosure, a carefully managed process designed to release selected information while concealing more sensitive realities. And beneath all of it lingered the most unsettling question of all. What if these programs had discovered something they still couldn't fully explain? Well, the first major wave of modern UFO disclosure didn't arrive with dramatic presidential speeches or televised announcements. Instead, it emerged gradually through leaked videos and declassified memoranda and congressional pressure, Freedom of Information Act requests, and investigative journalism. Then the official file release began. At first glance, many of the released documents appeared disappointing. Some are heavily redacted. Others contain mundane discussions about aerial observations and unidentified radar tracks or internal debates over declassification procedures. But careful researchers quickly realized something important. The significance was not always in what the documents explicitly stated. Often the most revealing details involved who was discussing the phenomena, which agencies were involved, and how long investigations had continued. And finally, the level of concern shown by defense officials. Patterns emerged almost immediately. Military encounters are far more common and publicly acknowledged, and I can testify to that. Pilots repeatedly reported objects operating near restricted airspace and naval training zones. Intelligence agencies tracked incidents internationally. Aerospace contractors appeared repeatedly within classified discussions. And some released records described encounters involving sudden acceleration, extreme maneuverability, silent propulsion, disappearance from radar, and objects entering or exiting the ocean. Particularly troubling were files involving nuclear facilities. For decades, rumors had circulated that unidentified objects showed unusual interest in missile bases and weapons installations. New released records appeared to confirm at least portions of those stories. Former missile officers described luminous objects hovering near launch facilities. Radar systems tracked unknown craft over sensitive military sites. In some cases, personnel claimed weapon systems experienced unexplained malfunctions during these encounters. Skeptics argued many incidents could be explained by equipment failures, misidentification, Cold War confusion, or weather balloons. Well, maybe, but the sheer number of recurring reports across decades troubled investigators. Then attention shifted toward the Apollo era. Among the most controversial material are discussions surrounding astronaut observations and mission transcripts. Some researchers claim portions of NASA communications have long been sanitized or withheld from the public. Stories started to surface involving unexplained lights near spacecraft, unusual objects tracked during lunar missions, and astronauts later hinted at encounters they refused to fully describe publicly. Most mainstream scientists rejected extraterrestrial interpretations. Still, public fascination exploded. The more files emerged, the clearer it became that the government's historical public position had been incomplete at best and a lie at worst. Even so, the releases themselves raised suspicion. Why were certain documents suddenly becoming available after decades of secrecy? Why were some files only partially declassified? Why did intelligence agencies continue resisting broader disclosure efforts? Well, to many researchers, the answer appeared obvious. Releases were being controlled. Governments were revealing enough information to acknowledge the phenomena without exposing deeper classified realities. And whether these realities involved extraterrestrial technology, advanced aerospace programs, intelligence operations, or some combination of all, remained uncertain. But one conclusion became increasingly difficult to avoid. The UFO issue had never truly disappeared. It had merely been hidden behind walls of secrecy, and now those walls are beginning to crack. Long before the modern disclosure era, rumors swirled around America's Apollo moon missions. Some stories are clearly exaggerated. Others originated from tabloid sensationalism and conspiracy culture. But beneath the noise existed a persistent belief that astronauts had witnessed unexplained phenomena during humanity's journey beyond Earth. The newly released files reignited these suspicions. Researchers examining declassified records discovered references to astronaut reports and mission anomalies and unexplained visual observations, and internal discussions regarding unidentified objects seen during space operations. Well, none of the documents openly declared extraterrestrial visitation, but they did reveal something important. NASA and military officials took unusual observations far more seriously than the public realized. During the Apollo era, astronauts operated under intense pressure. Every word spoken during missions was monitored, recorded, and reviewed by government officials. Public confidence in the moon program was considered strategically vital during the Cold War competition with the Soviet Union. And any unexplained event carried potential consequences. Throughout the Gemini and Apollo programs, astronauts occasionally reported flashes of light and drifting objects, unexplained reflections, and strange movements outside spacecraft windows, and even radar anomalies. Many incidents had conventional explanations, of course. Ice particles, equipment debris, optical effects in space could easily produce something that would be confusing visually. But some reports did remain unresolved, and one of the problems for the government in dealing with what happened in space, very few instances of weather balloons were ever discussed being in space. Apollo 11 generated decades of speculation after rumors spread that astronauts observed unusual objects on the lunar surface. Most historians dismiss these claims as distortions or misunderstandings of mission and communications. But in spite of that, the fascination never faded. Apollo 17 drew renewed attention after portions of mission transcripts repeatedly referenced unidentified luminous phenomena observed during the flight. Skeptics again pointed toward ordinary explanations, but researchers noted that certain observations appeared unusually cautious and heavily technical. The release of additional federal files added fuel to the fire. Documents referenced unknown objects, tracking anomalies, and restricted analysis that were circulated widely online. Social media exploded with claims that governments were finally admitting astronauts had encountered something extraordinary in space. Reality proved a lot more complicated, though. The files didn't provide definitive proof of alien contact, but what they did reveal was an ongoing internal concern regarding unidentified observations made during both atmospheric and space operations. Maybe even more significant was the military overlap. NASA never operated entirely separate from national security interest. If you look at its forming documents. It's actually a part of the Department of Defense. That's been kept rather close hold of, Bo. During the Cold War, aerospace technology, surveillance systems, missile research, and space exploration all intersected with defense and intelligence agencies. That overlap created fertile ground for secrecy. Some researchers believe unexplained Apollo incidents may have involved classified military technology unknown to even the astronauts themselves. Others argue that sightings point toward generally unknown phenomena operating beyond the Earth. And then there's the moon itself. For decades, theorists have speculated about anomalous structures, unusual photographs, and unexplained surface features captured during lunar missions. Most scientists dismiss these claims as misinterpretations of shadows and geological formations or image artifacts. But public fascination remains intense. And why would that be? Because the moon occupies a unique place in human imagination. It's close enough to explore, but far enough to preserve mystery. Every unexplained photograph, every missing transmission, every unusual transcript becomes fertile ground for speculation. The newly released files have reopened the debate in a dramatic fashion. And if nothing else, they demonstrate one undeniable truth. Even during humanity's greatest technological triumphs, astronauts occasionally encountered things they couldn't immediately explain. And somewhere within the archives of governments and intelligence agencies, additional answers may still remain hidden. One of the most disturbing patterns to emerge from decades of UFO investigation involves nuclear weapons facilities. Again and again, military personnel stationed at some of the most heavily guarded installations on Earth reported encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena operating near the missile silos, bomber bases, and strategic defense sites. And for years, these stories circulated quietly among veterans and researchers and intelligence insiders. Skeptics dismissed them as rumor, exaggeration, or Cold War paranoia. And then portions of the files began surfacing. Suddenly, incidents once considered fringe conspiracy theories appeared tied to actual military records, witness interviews, radar data, and classified investigative memoranda. The implications are unsettling, of course. Why would unidentified objects repeatedly appear near nuclear facilities? The pattern stretched back to the earliest years of the atomic age. Shortly after the U.S. detonated the first nuclear weapons, reports of strange aerial objects increased dramatically around military installations connected to atomic research and missile deployment. Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, Hanford, and later missile fields across the American West, personnel described luminous craft maneuvering over restricted zones. Security teams filed reports involving glowing objects hovering silently over sensitive areas before accelerating away at impossible speeds. Initially, intelligence officials feared Soviet espionage, of course. That concern made sense. During the early Cold War, the Soviet Union desperately sought information about America's nuclear capabilities. Unknown aircraft near weapons facilities represented a major national security threat. But as investigation continued, many instances failed to match conventional espionage patterns. Radar operators tracked objects capable of maneuvers no known aircraft could duplicate. Witnesses described silent discs, glowing spears, structured craft appearing suddenly before vanishing from detection systems. Some of the most controversial cases involved missile shutdown incidents. Former Air Force personnel later testified that unidentified objects appeared near missile silos shortly before weapons system malfunctioned unexpectedly. In certain cases, multiple missiles reportedly entered no launch status almost immediately. Captain Robert Salas became one of the best-known witnesses associated with these events. According to Salas, security guards at Malmstrom Air Force Base reported a glowing red object hovering outside the facility during a missile malfunction incident in 1967. Moments later, multiple nuclear missiles reportedly went offline. The Air Force denied extraterrestrial involvement and attributed this incident to technical problems, of course. But internal concern remained obvious. Classified investigations continued. Intelligence officials interviewed witnesses. Security assessments expanded. And the pattern didn't stop in America. Soviet military personnel described similar encounters near nuclear facilities during the Cold War. British defense officials monitored unexplained aerial activity near strategic installations. French investigators documented repeated military sightings tied to sensitive infrastructure. The consistency of the reports deeply troubled researchers. Whatever the explanation, the phenomena appeared drawn repeatedly toward humanity's most destructive technology. Some theorists believed extraterrestrial observers were monitoring human nuclear development out of concern for planetary survival. Others proposed more grounded explanations involving surveillance drones and classified aerospace projects or intelligence testing operations. Still others suspected psychological warfare experiments were underway. No definitive answer emerged, of course, but the newly released files did reveal something critical. Governments quietly treated these incidents far more seriously than they admitted publicly. Behind closed doors, officials recognized the possibility that unidentified objects had repeatedly penetrated highly restricted airspace surrounding nuclear assets. That fact alone represented a profound security concern. The deeper researchers examined the files, the clearer it became that the nuclear connection was not an isolated anomaly by any means. It was a recurring global pattern, and if the reports were given even particularly accurate, somebody or something had been watching humanity's deadliest weapons for decades. Well, the military pilots, of course, are trained observers. Their careers depend on recognizing aircraft silhouettes and understanding atmospheric conditions and identifying threats and maintaining composure under extreme stress. They're not easily rattled, nor are they prone to confusing ordinary objects for extraordinary phenomena. And that's precisely why pilot encounters became one of the most important elements of the disclosure movement. For decades, aviators reported incidents privately while avoiding public discussion. The stigma surrounding UFO reports was severe. Careers could be damaged, security clearances questioned, promotions jeopardized. Many pilots remained silent out of fear. But the released files and recent congressional hearings changed that dynamic dramatically. One by one, military aviators began stepping forward. And among the most famous, of course, was Commander David Fravor, the Navy pilot associated with the USS Nimitz Tic Tac encounter in 2004. His account would become one of the most defining cases of modern UFO disclosures. When the radar operators on board the USS Princeton, unknown objects had been tracking for days, performing extraordinary maneuvers off the California coast. The objects reportedly descended from about 80,000 feet to sea level within seconds before hovering motionless above the ocean. So Fravor and another pilot was sent to investigate. And as he approached the location, he saw the water was disturbed below, as though something large lurked right underneath the surface. And above that disturbance hovered a smooth white object roughly 40 feet long with no visible wings, exhaust, or conventional propulsion systems. The object moved intelligently, no question about that. When Fravor descended toward it, the craft reportedly retreated and reacted to his aircraft before accelerating away at astonishing speed. And seconds later, radar operators informed him the object had reappeared dozens of miles away at a prearranged combat air patrol point. The implications stunned military personnel involved in the encounter. If his account was accurate, the object demonstrated capabilities far beyond known aerospace technology, such as instantaneous acceleration, lack of visible propulsion, hypersonic maneuverability, and the apparent awareness of military operations. The Pentagon later authenticated the infrared footage connected to subsequent encounters involving Navy pilots. Additionally, aviators described objects shaped like spears and cubes enclosed within transparent fields, metallic discs, and dark craft maneuvering without visible control surfaces. Well, on that note, we've come to the end of today's show. Next week, we'll be talking about more of what the Pentagon has disclosed about UFOs. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, urging you to go to Amazon.com, look up Ken Hudnall, and look at some of the numerous books we come out with. We've got 140 of them out now. So until next week, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great weekend.